Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of FGC Behind the Smoke. Today we have a very special guest on. We have Matt Johnston. Matt is a full-time fire officer and the CEO of First Responder Health Services. A trained mental health clinician, Matt co-founded the Occupational Awareness Training Program in 2017 following a cluster of suicides within the fire service. The OAT program focuses on upstream mental health training for frontline workers and currently supports more than 10,000 participants across British Columbia. Combining 25 years of training in the mental health field with firsthand experience responding to nearly 5,000 emergency calls, Matt develops evidence-informed programs aimed at strengthening mental wellness and reducing suicide risk among first responders. Since founding FRH, the organization's education platform have delivered mental health training to over 100,000 users across Canada. Wow, 100,000 users?
Yeah.
Holy smokes, man. That's huge.
Yeah, thanks. It's one of those things that I feel has given me purpose when I reflect back on why and how the career change happened for me.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I got into the fire service when I was 33. I got hired at 34. So I was a little bit late to the game, but when I reflect back on the journey over the last 15 years, and obviously you mentioned the suicides in the mid 2010s, that started making me realize that, everything happens for a reason, in terms of how my career path and my passions kind of intermeshed over the years, when it came to bridging my mental health training and fire service. Because when you get hired, you're not necessarily bringing those types of skill sets to the job. It just kind
Mm-hmm.
of happened organically.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you're in a very unique um position because of your background with being a mental health clinician and then now working in the fire service where, you know, mental health is a really important thing and you have that like I feel like you have that insight, you know what I mean? Like compared to someone who hasn't come from your background, right? So, um if we can start though like just from when you were younger,
hmm
what was your goal always to get into like the mental health field? Like what kind of inspired that?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, we're sitting right at the base of Burnaby Mountain here. I went to SFU in 1996, and now it's 30 years later that I, started my degree in psychology. So time flies. Basically, the long story short of it is I ran varsity track and field. I ran on the Canadian national team. And basically, as long as I could get my university paid for, I just kept in school. And I just found like the student lifestyle meshed well with my athletic performance and running. And like many people that end up going into the art stream, I did so because I was kind of afraid of numbers. I
Hmm.
wasn't good at math, and then I realized in my third year university that I actually had to go back and get my math 12 for a prerequisite for an advanced statistics class at SFU. So, anyways, long story short, I ended up getting my degree in psychology, ran on the national team. And at the time when you're a federally carded athlete, they paid for your tuition as well. So I ended up, getting a master's in counseling psych uh, quite early on in my life, like at 25 years old,
Oh wow.
and ended up doing private practice. And that's when I started missing the team-based atmosphere that I had through running. And a lot of the runners that I competed with went into firefighting. And so, like many people in this profession, I found out about the profession through my friend network. And, I missed not only the teamwork and camaraderie, but I really wanted to find a position where it was, a high performance environment where, you could use your analytical skills and quickly problem solve things
Hmm.
in a methodical fashion. So, fire was, in my opinion, a great fit for my skill set. Um, the culture side was something that took a while to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like we've said a lot before on this podcast is when you're new to the fire service, it can be a huge culture shock.
Yeah.
Um and in a lot of different ways, right? But what we tend to find is when people are on probation, it's the culture around the hall, not necessarily the job itself on going on calls that people find stressful. It's everyday life around the halls, right? Um, what did you find was so different about it?
Well, I think when I look back, in, the early 2010s when I got on, I think there was a bit of a stigma, if I'm being completely honest, with my
Hmm.
background. The idea that I was a mental health professional, a lot of people use the term shrink, confuse it with psychiatry, confuse it with psychoanalysis, and you know, at the end of the day, I was essentially like a youth worker that worked individually with kids. Like
Hmm.
to me, there wasn't a lot of mystery or rocket science behind the work I did. Um, but I swam uphill in terms of feeling like I didn't really have a voice to clarify kind of what I did.
Right.
And so I think in some ways, there was some resistance because I wasn't part of a trades background. At the time, the fire service, many of the captains came from a trades background,
Hmm.
and that's what was valued as a new recruit. And so, every single one of us, whether it's our ethnic background, our age, or gender, we all have certain things that we feel kind of, let's call it our exclusionary criteria towards fitting in.
Hmm.
And so you try to overcompensate. And for me, the way I tried to overcompensate was to learn more about building construction and find ways to and I was quite envious of, the plumbers, the carpenters, and the electricians that I got on with. And I still am because those are skills that I would love to learn. I've chipped away at it over the years, but I was never exposed to those tools or that training
Hmm.
or someone in my life that had that type of training. So I've learned over the years to kind of celebrate those differences, and I think the fire service is in a much better state than when I found it because I like to think, at least within my crews, that no matter what someone's background is, they have something to offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important that people have a variety of skill sets, right? If you have everyone on the job that's just in trades, that's only it's like you said, it's great to know, but that's only a very small portion of the job, right? And I feel like especially in today's day where people are a lot more open to talking about mental health as maybe compared to when you got hired in the early 2010s, right?
Yeah,
I think it's so important to have somebody like you who has that background in it, because you can actually advocate for a lot of these people who are going through stuff. And, like we were kind of talking about before we started recording, sometimes when your mental health gets worse, your awareness of it actually diminishes,
hmm,
right?
yeah,
Um, do you mind maybe going into a little bit more depth about that? And because I know for me personally, like when I was having some stuff with anxiety and stuff like that, but it was more so my wife that noticed more than me,
right,
right? Which was really interesting because it wasn't until she pointed it out that I was like, holy shit, yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. Like I didn't even realize it. Like I knew I was feeling anxiety and stuff, but I didn't realize it was to the point where it was actually truly affecting like people around me,
right,
you
yeah.
know?
And maybe even the workplace was the last place that it surfaced.
Oh, absolutely. That and thank you for bringing that up because I remember talking to my oldest brother. He's a policeman and he's gone through his own issues with PTSD and stuff like that. Um, but I remember when I was going through that, him and I were chatting, and he was saying how, he could be going to a call for someone with a gun,
Mhm.
and he'd be totally fine. His heart wouldn't skip a beat, but then when he got home, it was like all of a sudden it would happen, right?
Mm,
Which was really interesting. And that's what was happening to me too. It wasn't at work. I felt fine at work, but it was off the job when it really started to affect me.
yeah, I mean, there's multiple angles to jump in on that. Someone that's struggling with their mental health, sometimes, ironically, the workplace and public safety is the place that they feel most normal.
Yeah.
The whole idea of this story that my friend Dr. Duncan Shield speaks about, where he had a client in public safety that said, Duncan, I'm the type of guy that should be put behind glass and in case of emergency, break it because during an emergency, I'm the guy. But when it comes to the rest of my life, I feel dead inside.
Wow.
And so it's pretty harsh.
Yeah.
But what my point is that in public safety, policing, fire, paramedics, go down the list, functioning in the red, let's call it, where we function over feeling, we move any emotional reactions to the back because we know how to behaviorally engage in tasks that people are running away from, have a huge consequence on our lived experience of mental health um, in and beyond the workplace. And so when I mentioned that, the workplace is usually where, your mental health kind of crisis
Mm-hmm.
surfaces last, what I mean by that is by the time someone takes days or sets off due to mental health, it's often something where their spouses or someone within their home environment have had issues with them for years leading up to that crisis.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's very interesting because, you know, when you think about it, you think it would be the opposite, right? And I think that's why a lot of people maybe don't realize that they're going through something until somebody points it out to them, is because you assume that when you're at work in those high stress environments, that that's when it's going to show,
Mm.
right? But really, that's not the case, right? It's
It's
typically
not the
showing.
case because of our training
Yeah.
and the type of personality that we hire. If you think about the way that we not only go through the training process, any sorts of vulnerability is an exclusionary criteria to getting hired.
Yeah.
And so we're taught that we basically are supposed to behaviorally engage in any sort of tasks in a uniform manner. Like that's why we have uniforms,
Hmm.
is because of the consistency. And my point is that emotional health and our personal backgrounds and our biological sensitivities to sound, to light, what have you, are all as unique as a fingerprint.
Hmm.
So the fire service has found a way to make it seem like we can create this uniform behavioral response without having any sort of emotional reaction outside of what they consider would be the norm.
Right.
And so the advantage of being able to function in a high stressful environment is that you can get the jobs done. The disadvantage is how do you experience highs and lows within your personal life? A lot of first responders that struggle kind of flatline in states that are basically based around irritability and anger, or which is the high anxiety response, which is hypervigilance,
Hmm.
or they go to the other side of it, which is complete detachment, where nothing bothers them, whether it's a traumatic experience or something that should shake them to the core. They become hypovigilant, which is really consistent with depression.
Right.
So the task we need to have for the profession is how can we behaviorally engage in really challenging things and then recover, emotionally decontaminate from that process before we enter our home life, so
Hmm.
that work and that mentality of that paramilitary environment doesn't infiltrate the way we deal with our spouse or our children or any other people in our personal lives.
Yeah, for sure. I find me personally, um, I'm very hyper vigilant when I'm off the job.
Mm,
Like even yesterday, my wife and I I have a 7-month-old son, took him for a walk and he's in his stroller and like I'm constantly just scanning everything,
right.
right? Um, and, definitely this has been something that has really happened to me after getting on the job because before it's, these are things I would have never thought of. I would have never thought of a car potentially, coming onto the sidewalk and hitting us but I find that no matter where I am, no matter where I'm going, I'm constantly um, almost looking for an escape route or a plan B, or if this happens, how are we going to react? Or if I come across, say a really bad MVI or a medical emergency, what am I going to do? And I've talked to a lot of other friends of mine who are first responders in all different careers, right? Like even policing and paramedicine, but it seems to be a very common thing, at least in my friend group. Um, and then you also talk about that hypo vigilant, right?
Hmm.
Where so you're essentially saying that like a traumatic event that should for most people cause not cause but kind of get some sort of a reaction from
Hmm.
uh these people aren't necessarily feeling anything towards that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I would say in general, not all the time, but typically that hypovigilance response is a result of essentially the hypervigilance wearing out your body over the
Mm,
years and
interesting.
even over the decades.
Right.
So for instance, I would say like the at-risk group is more of the senior firefighter, senior officer, fire administrator that's been in the service for more than 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's and there's science behind this. So if we just kind of just a thumbnail sketch of what happens is we have this HPA axis, this hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And basically what happens is that when we have these hypervigilant responses over time, our baseline cortisol and adrenaline end up spiking. And the idea is that hopefully your body metabolizes those stress hormones, but your body doesn't come down right away from a hormonal response. I hear it's about 90 minutes
Oh wow.
depending on the level of call it stimulus in the environment. So that's why it's so important to do cardiovascular activity and self-care because you want to get these stress hormones going, metabolize, and move on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a reason why roller coasters are 4 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It's because if you sustain it, something that's exciting and exhilarating becomes exhausting and terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
So my point is that for first responders that don't take care and don't have awareness of these hypervigilant responses, is that HPA access basically wears itself out. And as we get older, naturally, cortisol and adrenaline will increase within our system. And so what ends up happening is when it gets worn out, we have all these inflammatory responses and what have you. But at the end of the day, cortisol can essentially act like bleach on your ability to learn, like your hippocampus. It
Mm-hmm.
shrinks, and you feel like your shell of your former self, where you can go to anything in life that is troubling or traumatic, and ironically feel that's your norm, and then you go on a holiday and you feel completely disconnected from your family and you're wondering why, you have no emotional response to your daughter's graduation.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we've got to be aware of this right at the early stages of our career. And like, it's great when I hear you say, on the one hand, it's, that you're hyper vigilant, but at least you're aware of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Many people in this profession, I think, historically weren't aware of the impact the job is having on their personal lives until their lives had fallen apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we'll delve into it, but the highly at-risk individual in the fire service is someone that doesn't have anyone to come home to and doesn't have anyone to reflect how their emotional health has changed over time. And so that self-awareness decreases, years of service increase. It becomes a perfect storm for severe mental health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that some form of being able to just be self-aware is like kind of the first step in being able to at least, recognize that things are changing? Because like I said, like when I was dealing with my anxiety issues, it was really like I knew I was having anxiety problems, but I think part of me didn't want to admit it. Um, but it was really my wife who was like, "Hey, this is what's going on," kind of thing, right? And it was really after that that I was like, "Okay, I need to be more self-aware and I need to really look into this more." And I spoke to Brandon,
Oh yeah,
who's a
great
great
guy,
guy.
Brandon Curry.
Yeah, he's such an awesome guy. But I spoke to him and he had a lot of resources for me. And um, you know, one thing that I found really helped me through that kind of stuff was just like really vigorous exercise,
Nice.
right?
Yeah.
Now that being said, that's something that works for me doesn't necessarily mean it, everyone's different, right?
Hmm.
But for those people who say don't necessarily have someone at home that they can, uh, that's somebody that can maybe point these things out to them. How do people become more self-aware?
Yeah, especially if they've grown up in the fire service
Mm-hmm.
and now they're, pushing 50 or in their 50s. Let's take, for example, the hockey player, the rugby player that, is struggling with a hip issue or a knee issue and either got it replaced or what have you, but doesn't have the ability to really engage in the sport that they used to and that they love.
Mm-hmm.
What we have to do in the fire service is recognize, okay, where am I at in my life in terms of my mobility and what would be healthy for me? And I think one of the most challenging things in the fire service is if you're hired young and you're used to being a core person in the hockey community or the rugby community, and now you're in your 50s. I think it's very incumbent on that individual to try new things that's outside of the realm of the fire service,
Mm-hmm.
to be around people within your age group that have no idea what it's like to be in the fire service and to realign your peer groups in a way that allows you to start transitioning your identity beyond the fire service in a healthy way that isn't just directly related to people that work the same shift pattern as you.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's, yoga, I heard someone talking about going to Pilates yesterday, a young guy. I'd never heard that before. So, the winds are changing within the fire service on self-care, even at a very young age, which I really look forward to the last 10 years of my career where I see young people open to these things. And then like hiking groups, Toastmasters, like stuff that gets the brain stimulated in a way that, operational guidelines hasn't affected the way that your black and white thinking
Mm-hmm.
on the world has really dominated your mindset for decades, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really speaking to the age group that like I'm moving into as someone in my late 40s. Those are the highest risk groups in the fire service. And those are the people that tend to be in high ranking positions within the fire service, but ironically, they're the ones that need to be hearing this message the most. We're in an era now where identity and profession aren't as nearly as intermixed as it
Mm-hmm.
used to be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think we've got to take advantage of that. And my age group can learn a lot from how the younger demographic in the fire service is approaching the career. Not in every way, but in some ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right about that. Like, I often say to like my friends and stuff that, this is the best job in the world. It really is, and I love it. Um, but it's a job.
Yeah,
I don't firefighting is what I do. It's not who I am,
yeah,
and I think my age group and my seniority level in the fire service, people that are in the same kind of seniority as me, I think they all kind of feel the same way. So like you said, like maybe this younger generation that's coming through, like they seem to be doing a lot of a better job of understanding that they have a life outside of the fire service and not everything has to be fire related, as opposed to say, some of the I don't want to say older guys, but like some of the guys who have been on the job for quite a bit longer,
yeah.
right?
And if you're in your 50s and you've been in the fire service for 30 years, there's no denying it. You grew up in the fire service.
Yeah,
I mean, we know if someone listening to this podcast is in their 50s and they think back to when they were hired in their early 20s, they were still a kid.
yeah,
Neurodevelopment doesn't finish until your mid 20s. So
yeah,
if you're hired before the age of 25, your brain is still developing.
yeah.
We can't deny the science of this. And so it's almost like in any stage of your life when you get hired, whether it's 20 or 35, those early experiences on the job are almost like the same level of impact that early childhood experiences have on an individual's development, whether it's good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that else is driving mental health issues in the fire service is people that have adverse experiences early in their career that's kind of shaped their reputation in the young stages of their career in the fire service that um, they may never let it go because it becomes a core piece of how they see the profession.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have people that soldier through 20, 30 years, and they're just waiting for that pension to kick in because they've had such a difficult time in the fire service.
Yeah.
And it may be for issues completely beyond their control. It could be generational, like the suicides that I went through in the 2015s have had a major impact on the way that I see the profession.
Hmm.
And there's no doubt whether someone admits it or not, anyone that went through that era in the 2010s has been impacted by either those deaths by personal relationship or being at the service and seeing the impact those deaths have had on family. And then you pile it all together with your personal life issues, department stressors, and then the calls you go to. Um, we have to acknowledge just the impact that this profession has on our mental health. It's affecting all of us.
Absolutely.
And we used to, and we still have this narrative of it's not a sign of weakness to talk about. I think we need to move on to a different strategy in terms of how we speak to that, because I don't feel that that message has really led to, I think it started the conversation going, but we need in 2026 to redefine that and normalize it
Yeah.
because we still have, people on peer teams that act like they're fine. It's for this person. And
Hmm.
it's like, no, we're all in the same boat here.
Yeah.
I really become leery of people that feel that there's a certain member that just absolutely needs help. I think it's when we have these wounded healers in the fire service, and there's a lot of them, and I was one of them at one point, and it ebbs and flows, but at least I'm aware.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
my point is that sometimes your need to help is driven by some subconscious aspects of your personality or life circumstance, and it kind of perpetuates a cycle of unprocessed grief and trauma.
Yeah.
And we haven't figured that out in the profession yet on how to deal with that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we need to figure out for sure,
Yeah.
right? I would say, like you said, people, speaking of, it doesn't mean that you're weak if you need to talk to someone or whatever. I think it's the opposite. I think it shows that you're actually a very strong individual. And the reason why I say that is because asking for help is difficult,
Hmm.
especially in our line of work, especially, mostly a male-dominated field where, there's that sense of bravado and that kind of stuff. Uh, to me, like if you're somebody who's going through something and you're like, "Hey, I'm not okay. I gotta figure this out." To me, that's very impressive. Because I think that's a very rare thing to be able to do. And it goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier about just like that self-awareness thing, right? Like if you have that self-awareness that you're like, no, I'm not okay, like I gotta deal with this, that to me is strength,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and I think we need to get away from even just saying, oh, it's not weak to talk about it. We need to start saying it's strength,
Yeah.
right? It shows how strong you are to be able to put yourself in a vulnerable situation where you feel that you need to talk to someone.
Yeah, and when I think of any fire department that's looking to hire, what's one of the words that consistently comes up is the term innovative.
Hmm.
And along innovative, I think of a high performance environment. And really, when it comes to mental health and reaching out for mental health services, not necessarily like a cry for help, but
Hmm.
it adds to optimal performance, high performance, and innovation.
Hmm.
And I can tell you, like, even within the leadership ranks, there still hasn't been that connection made
Yeah.
because the leaders, whether it's the union executives or the administrative staff, have to toe the line in these narratives. And that's when it will trickle down and
Hmm.
be permission giving for every other rank of seniority within an organization. But I rarely see that even today.
Yeah. Which is disappointing because especially in today's day where mental health is there's a lot more awareness of it, like, and I'm sure you can speak to it. Like when you first came on the fire service, how many of those captains and other members that were around in those days, how many of them were probably dealing with mental health problems but just didn't want to talk about it?
I mean, I would say some of the most mentally ill people on the job were the people that were looked up to the most.
Mm-hmm.
I had a captain that I didn't work with very much, but worked with him a couple of sets before the end of his career. And he said, you know what? I could go and scrape a kid's face off the pavement and it wouldn't bother me. And I thought to myself, like, that's exactly where I don't want to be
Yeah.
when I
Yeah.
retire,
Fuck,
right? Like
fuck that, man.
an
That's
absolute
yeah.
stripping of humanity, empathy, call it compassion fatigue, moral injury. Those are all indications that the profession really impacted you,
Yeah.
right? And sometimes those people that struggle the most with their mental health are also the people that are incredibly talented operationally,
Mm-hmm.
which is something that the default profession falls back onto as a default, which is, while they're amazing in an IC position, wonderful, absolutely core skill. But what about the other 99.9% of the time when we're not, you know,
At a fire,
at a
at a
major
yeah.
emergency scene where those skills are required?
Mm-hmm.
And we're still not there yet. There's a lot of really good people in the profession, but we're still, I believe, kind of that skill set is drowned out by the default of the operational expert.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the most emotionally healthy individual in the fire service is someone that is competent at the operational side, absolutely core skill, but is able to turn that down throughout the day with their crew to be a human. And for the most part, I would say, in my experience, officers are able to do that.
Yeah.
But now that I've gone through my officer training, I've reflected a lot on, my personality and who I want to be. The last second half of my career, let's say, and I started my career as a youth worker, and I feel like that's how I'm going to end my career is as a youth worker, which is building young people up in the fire service to be competent in their skills, to recognize that there are no dumb people in the fire service. We don't hire dumb, we don't hire unresilient people.
Mm-hmm.
The hiring process is brutally tough.
Yeah.
If you've gotten the job, you have the skill set to learn, and
Absolutely.
everyone learns differently. So, I know that people that start off early on, myself included, like your self-confidence can take a beating,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's your bad
Absolutely.
muffins, whether it's a drill that went poorly. There's no question that that someone's going to have some self-confidence issues, no matter how good they are.
Yeah.
And it isn't only until years later that you find out that they really struggled, but they never seemed like they did when you worked with them 10, 12, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So we have to normalize the idea that this profession can be tough on us. But if you're in the profession, you've earned it, you can be good at it. And, your confidence might wax and wane over time, but the long game, everyone's going to be okay, in my opinion, if you're putting work and pride into your job.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we need more of a mentorship approach in the
Hmm.
fire service when it comes to new people coming on. Um, it's like you said, there's especially for the new people, there's a lot of different stressors, not only performing well on the job, but also going through probation and making muffins and all these things, right? Where you know, I, I think we've gone away, at least from my experience, we've gone away from the hazing side of things, but there is still definitely an element of I don't want to put it in the wrong term, but there's definitely still an element of s- stressors on things that there doesn't really probably need to be stressors on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important that we take a more mentorship approach to the new people on the job, right? Um, you know, if you got a probie and they're messing up on their drill, it's like, okay, hey man, like you messed up on this, but let's go through it together, and you're not the only person who's messed up on this,
Hmm.
right? Um, it's every time that they do, you know, create a mistake, it's a teachable moment where they can improve from, as opposed to just like shitting on them. You know what I
Absolutely.
mean? And being like, "Oh man, I can't believe you did that. I would have never done like that's a bunch of bullshit."
Yeah.
You know, we've all fucked up on this job,
Yeah.
especially when we're new,
Yeah.
right? And if you can't uh if you can't help your probie learn from their mistakes, and if you're going to ridicule them for making mistakes, they're going to be so nervous about making mistakes that they're actually going to perform way worse when it comes to being on the fire ground, right?
Absolutely.
And
And then it just reinforces that negativity bias.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my son's turning 17 in March, and the way that I approach, teaching new recruits is similar to how I would teach my son.
Hmm.
Do you want to tear someone down? Has that strategy ever worked? You know, th- it's a dated strategy
Hmm.
that just keeps, when we talk about intergenerational trauma, to pass and transmit that learning style, which isn't about learning, it's about flooding the stress response, making
Hmm.
people anxious, and scaring them into making the right decisions. There's no evidence in learning that's a proper strategy of doing it.
Right.
And it's interesting because over the years, I've heard stories of some of the most challenging kind of, let's call them militaristic personalities on the job. And I've heard stories about how they were when they got on,
Hmm.
and there's a consistent theme there. And, going back to you saying, well, I noticed I'm hyper vigilant when I'm walking my young child in a stroller. Um, the self-awareness is what allows us to stay healthy because we recognize an issue.
Hmm.
But if we don't recognize it, if we can't name it, we can't tame it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the militaristic values that essentially have entered a municipal workplace, which is what we are, municipal workers, are strategies that don't foster, um, in my opinion, competence, and optimal performance, which I was quite surprised by, getting into this profession because I thought that's what it was all about.
Hmm.
And I'm happy to say, as someone that just completed my fire officer training, that the way they've taught us to deal with, drills on the fire ground is not just like the Oreo cookie of saying something good, then get to the negative and then end it constructively. It's about talking about what was good and what can become great.
Hmm.
And if we think about like the motivational speakers, the thought experts of the day, what draws people into optimal performance? It's like, the Tony Robbins kind of model, right? Which is all about like celebrating the good that we have in life and how do we expand this? And to me, that's all about firefighter wellness. We don't
Right.
talk about wellness enough. And that's what's going to keep people mentally, emotionally healthy on the job.
Right.
That's what's going to make, the fire ground or a complicated MVI, um, an optimal performance moment where things get done efficiently. People are able to engage in a task without thinking that they're going to be criticized when they're done. It's time for that approach. There's no question. So I'm
Yeah.
happy to see the curriculum within the fire service shifting towards that model. Every organization in fire culture is unique as someone that's trained across Canada in different fire halls. What my view is might not resonate in other departments because they might be in a completely different, organizational value system.
Right.
So we have to be careful not to overgeneralize too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I'm amazed at how different fire culture is across the Fraser River and bordering cities, it changes depending on lots of factors.
Really interesting. Yeah, because like I always assume that the fire culture is pretty similar everywhere you go, right? But I guess yeah, like just different departments have different traditions and different cultures and different ways of training and stuff, right?
Similar personalities, I would say. Like you
Yeah.
kind of, when you go into a different fire hall in a different city, you can almost like think of someone you work with that is
Yeah.
just like that person.
Well, I think this job draws a certain person,
Yeah,
this job is appealing to a certain personality type, I think that's why there's so many people on the job that are so similar.
Yeah.
But a question I have for you is, do you think, because we're talking about just like dealing with stress and stuff, but do you think there's some benefit to having some sort of a controlled stress environment for new people, so that way they are able to adapt to stress? Do you think
Yes.
there's benefit there?
Yeah, I mean, we have to recognize that, the peer pressure, fire culture in general is incredibly stressful for a new
Hmm.
person, right?
Yeah.
It's not like when you get a job at an office that you have 7, 8 people around you watching you type, and then they give feedback on your typing skills and what you should have done differently.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that the baseline for stress is actually quite high. And there's two different personality types if we look at like the stress performance inverted U curve that's very popular in sports psychology. There's that zone of optimal performance, or they call it U stress, where stress and performance kind of peak at a moment.
Mm.
And so if you have, and it very rarely happens in my experience, but an incredibly laid back, let's call it lazy recruit by recruit standards, yeah, the crew might want to,
Up it a bit.
up it a little bit to
Yeah.
get that stress level up to get them into that zone of optimal performance. What typically happens is the majority of recruits don't want to make any mistakes.
Hmm.
So in other words, their stress levels are high, even though they're hiding it very well. So in other words, the crew's role really is to help them down regulate a little bit so that their stress level's low and their performance can peak at that optimal zone of performance.
Mm.
And so it depends on the personality. Typically, I would say it's an individual's responsibility to kind of figure out where they are on the curve.
Hmm.
But for someone like myself who has a new recruit rotating through my crew almost every month, you start seeing patterns and you start seeing what are the needs of these individuals. And, you know, um, whether you're 20 or 40, there's going to be quite a range in terms of personality types. But the consistent theme is everyone has a lot of pride in this job.
Hmm.
So if anything, the crew has to really be, see, I was going to use the term soft, but there's a stigma with the term soft, right?
Hmm.
But they need to be constructive in their feedback,
Yeah.
because there's no bigger biased individual about how someone's doing than them themselves.
Right.
There's nothing you can say to many of these new recruits that would be worse than what they're telling themselves.
Right.
You know it when you hear feedback about how their drill went, and they're like, "Ooh, yeah, I should have said that RBS, or I should have done that RBS earlier." And it's like, "Okay, let me think. Like, I didn't really notice that being an issue." And then it's like,
Totally. Yeah.
"Okay, all right, yeah, I mean, I had my little thing here, but for you, that was your big thing?"
Right.
So people are looking at things like drills from a different perspective. And if anything, like keeping feedback really constructive, supportive, the idea that any advancements in the fire service was built on mistakes happening.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah.
how learning happens, is through mistakes. I'm hoping that that's the next era in the fire service, is that we are more tolerant of making mistakes or questionable choices in training, where it gives us an opportunity to learn from that,
Hmm.
so that when we're out in the real world of engaging in an emergency situation, that we tidy those things up.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like I said earlier, I think the best way to learn really is like, at least for me, is from mistakes that I've made in the past, right?
Hmm.
And understanding that, okay, this is kind of a weak point for me. I need to improve on that. And then also being able to, when I have probationers come through our crew, being able to tell them and teach them, through me learning from my mistakes and telling
Hmm.
them that too,
Yeah,
right? And I think that's another thing that we need to be honest about too, is um telling our probationers that, like, hey, like, we mess up too,
yeah.
right? It's what
Normalize it.
yeah,
Yeah.
to me, it's what you do when you mess up. It's what
Hmm.
you do when you make a mistake. Do you learn from it? Do you recognize it and you go, okay, you know what? I did this. I'm gonna learn from this. I'm gonna try not to let this happen again, kind of
Yeah.
thing. to me, that's what really makes someone a good probationer in a lot of ways.
And a good firefighter.
Just I think
Yeah.
just a good human in
And a good
general,
human. Yeah.
right? You can carry that over into your personal life too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that it's an interesting timing that you mentioned that, because I had two members on the back of my truck that were getting ready to go through their emergency vehicle operating training. And I always take a very humble approach to helping these people, and it usually starts with, I'm not an EVO instructor.
Mhm.
So this is going to be like when, my mom taught me how to drive.
Yeah. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? So I'm going to tell you some streetwise stuff because you're going to be filled with the technical details.
Mhm.
And so here's some of the mistakes that I've made over the last 10 years driving that I want to share with you so that you're in a better situation.
Yeah.
This didn't happen to me, but let's say that you get a handoff that the truck's leaking oil, and you're on a crew where they work out right in the beginning of the shift. But the mechanic calls at 7:45 and says, "Hey, I heard the truck's leaking oil. When you tilted the cab, what did you see?"
Mhm.
Right? And it's like, "Well, I just got off the treadmill."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So my point is these little nuances that that's my legacy, is to try and talk about the why we do things the way we do
Mhm.
things. And this generation can't get away with what previous generations did. There's video footage of
Oh,
everything now,
absolutely,
right?
yeah.
And so having a humble approach. And, yesterday, I had one of these EVO guys that I'd never worked with before text me and say, "Hey, Matt, like, thanks so much for taking the time to go through the truck." I didn't think I really did anything
Mhm.
other than give them my time, but I could tell by his response that he hadn't heard it from that angle before. And my response by text is, "Hey, yeah, if you have any questions, I probably don't know the answer. Ha ha ha,"
Yeah.
right? And it's because I want to give permission to the idea that, like, this is how learning happens. It shouldn't be a stressful experience. We put enough stress on ourselves.
Mhm.
And so, it's kind of fun to have a little bit of humor mixed in with training, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Where it just cuts the anxiety a little bit and the pressure.
Yeah.
And it's like, let's just talk as, firefighters, as colleagues, about, like, the mistakes I've made as a EVO guy,
Yeah.
because I actually think I'm going to save the department a lot of money by sharing these stories.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. And you know what? And taking that approach too, with kind of uh, you know, taking down the pressure, um, people are gonna learn better that way. It's hard to learn under pressure. So then that way at least now they can learn in a good environment, and then when they go out,
Yeah,
they're gonna be even better because they've been able to learn more effectively, right? And
totally.
efficiently.
I mean, here's a firefighter that's going to be in their third year of service, working at one of 15 fire halls in a city of 340 square kilometers, yeah, and 340 square kilometers, and driving one of like 60 apparatus,
Mhm.
like within 3 years of service,
Yeah.
and having the pressure of going to map and knowing where they're going.
Yeah.
We think about, like, the expectation of that process. Thank God I grew up in the city that I work in.
Mhm.
If I worked for Vancouver, I don't know anything about, like, names of streets and that'd be a steep
Absolutely.
learning curve for me.
Yeah.
So we have to recognize that, like, this is naturally a flooding response. So if anything, learning should be something that people feel great about when they go to bed leading into that EVO experience, right?
Yeah.
And also recognizing that I didn't know, I didn't really think about it, that when you get on in the fire service, it's like 15 to 20 years of training ahead of you, by the time that you've got your FO2. And I mean, if you're going into the battalion chief stream or going into administrative, there's that leadership training on top of
Mhm.
that. So, like, there is benchmarks throughout every, call it, 5 years of your career, pretty much all the way through your career.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it applies to everyone in the fire service, not just junior members.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of one of the things I think is really cool about this job too, is that there's always new stuff to learn,
Hmm.
right? There's always, even like, even if you're, a 1 year guy, who you're not doing EVO or anything like that, but there's still like so much cool stuff out there when it comes to fire science, and it's constantly evolving, and it's just a career where, I had my brother on here. He's on probation. But that's one of the things that he said that he really liked about it is he really understood after getting hired that like this is one of those careers where you're always going to be learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cool, man. Like it's great in my opinion, like to be part of something like that, right?
Oh, it's truly special. I mean, you think about your peer network and how they look up to you, and when they describe something, whether it's mechanical or structural
Hmm.
going on in their house, like, the value that we offer our friend groups beyond the fire service or our family members. I mean, we are, one of the best answers I ever heard about what made you suitable for the fire service is, well, I'm a great neighbor, you know?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
And you just think about the value that we offer to stratas and to our neighbors, and it's just we are a very unique demographic within society.
Yeah,
And we're
absolutely.
often having to problem solve things that we don't know the answer to, but when you add up four people on a fire truck and they know one quarter of the answer individually,
Mm.
that's the answer,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So there's that wisdom through group that needs to be celebrated as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses, right? And you know, people, just because you might not know something in one field doesn't mean that you're not good at what you do. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Because then you have strengths in other parts, and then the other person riding beside you might be the opposite. So together, right? And that's why it's like it's such a we're constantly talking about it being a team environment, and that's why it's so important because you might not have the answer, but somebody you're working with might have the answer, and you might have the answer to something that they don't have the answer for. So you're able to really accomplish a lot
yeah.
together. And like you said, like each person knowing a quarter of the answer, well, you have the full answer there with
Yeah.
four people on the truck, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure there's lots of people that listen to your podcast that have felt because of their previous profession that they didn't really have much to offer.
Hmm.
And for those people that might be new in their career, like, be patient because your time will come
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
you shine on a crew or at a call because you knew something.
Yeah.
Whether it's, your mother tongue, your language, whether it's your gender, whether it's your age, whether it's your career background, like, there's every person in the fire service is an asset on
Hmm.
certain calls.
Absolutely. Like I tell people, like basically any career that you've done before, there is a part of that that will translate very well into the fire service. We had a client of ours who came to us for interview coaching, and his background was he was a bartender,
Mhm.
right? And he was very worried of the fact that he didn't have like a construction background or anything like that, and he felt that he didn't have much to offer the fire service, and he was really eager to want to have something to offer. And I reminded him, I said, look, you might not have that background, right? But you'll be able to learn that. But what you do have is you have the ability to talk to people.
Yeah, customer service.
Customer service, like our job is a very customer service based job,
100%.
right? Majority of the calls that we're going to are medical calls, and you know what? You got to be able to have good bedside manner and a compassionate approach to
Good
people.
control to your emotions.
Exactly, right?
Think
So,
about dealing with a difficult customer as a bartender. It
yeah,
happens every day.
yeah,
Probably an expert at dealing with difficult people,
yeah, de-escalate,
right?
de-escalation
Like,
and that kind of
what
stuff.
are chiefs most worried about in our job?
Yeah,
It's about customer service and
absolutely.
how we present ourselves in the public,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah. It's funny, last time we sat down together, the roles were kind of reversed.
Yeah,
You
that's
were
right.
interviewing me and now I'm interviewing you, which is pretty cool. But before we get any further, I was supposed to give you this at the
Oh,
start of the
sweet.
podcast.
No,
So
I love it.
every guest gets a podcast hat.
I'll definitely be
Boris
This will be part of
designed
my
that.
beach
So
outfit this summer for
yeah,
sure. Thanks,
awesome.
Adamo.
Yeah,
I love the logo. Very creative.
absolutely. Yeah,
Nice.
thanks, man. Um, So, like I said, last time the roles were reversed,
Hmm.
and that was during the occupational awareness training.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to our listeners and what that is, and can
Yeah,
we
sure.
spend some time talking about that?
Yeah, so I've always been a fan of mental health training in the fire service, but I've been acutely aware of the wellness fatigue that can happen.
Hmm.
Um, you know, I've sat through those BC Hydro videos of online learning before, and I know that for me personally, when I'm on duty, retaining information is the square root of what I can when I'm thinking about something
Hmm.
without the fire culture around me. So, um, we wanted to create a mental health training program that was palpable to the most resistant members in the fire service.
Hmm.
And we also wanted we recognized that trying to do this in person was going to be impossible. I think there's like what, 57-ish locals within British
Yeah,
Columbia.
there's quite a few. Yeah.
And, training every member of every crew in person is not realistic. So what we did is back in, I guess about 2022, um, we worked with the BC Municipal Safety Association on a concept where we would provide monthly training in station on duty for firefighters. They could also log into this education platform off duty and watch it with their spouses or even their teenage kids.
Hmm.
And it was about creating a program that was backed by empirical evidence of success, but also presented in a way that wasn't focused on mental ill health.
Hmm.
Um, the Canadian research community has done a really good job of promoting mental health and public safety in a negative, disordered illness lens.
Hmm.
And I've been very steadfast in creating messages within the fire service that builds on mental wellness rather than looking at psychological discord. So what does that mean? It means that we're not talking about burnout, depression, PTSD, and just like, here are the warning signs. Here's what, like, people know when they're struggling with intrusive memories,
Hmm.
and it might be their norm, but what we really wanted to do was get upstream. And so the BC Municipal Safety Association formed a committee with the BC Chiefs Association, the BC Professional Fire Association, the Training Officers Association, the Volunteer Firefighters Association, even BC Wildfire.
Nice.
And they came together collectively and they said, we want to, um, I was honored. We want to be able to basically take the content that Matt and his team creates and get it out to every member on the front line. And so what we did is we worked with Dr. Duncan Shields, the founder of the BC Firefighter Resiliency Program, and I basically tried to scale his approach, capture his magic that him and his team have at Loon Lake with BC firefighters. And I still say that even though we're officially done the series, his work is incredibly like under recognized
Hmm.
and really underappreciated. And why I say that is because the program in Maple Ridge that we scaled to bring it into the fire halls is recognized as one of 8 programs by Movember internationally as having statistically significant reductions in symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, depression. And that data has been built from BC firefighters. I'm
Wow.
thinking around 400 BC firefighters have now gone to Loon Lake over the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of really key drivers to making that a success. But the program that we built, there's nothing out there like it. I scoured internationally different initiatives. And you're right, we have over 10,000 enrollments. I think the legacy of it is that people are going to be able to log in, and this mental health training and the messaging is going to stand the test of time,
Hmm.
in that people 20 years from now will be able to relate to what Duncan's speaking about. Because while, the culture might shift, the brain's not going to change structurally.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not going to magically evolve to be able to deal with life stressors any better than, what we're currently dealing with. So, yeah, it's a 3-year process. It took a lot of collaboration. There's a lot to weed through in terms of different organizations that have maybe different priorities. Um, but I've traveled teaching across the country the last 7 or 8 years, and the training's really resonated with certain members, and I'm happy. I hope that you know um, it's been valued to some members and maybe even saved people's lives by getting connected to other resources.
Absolutely. I think it's there's tons of value in it. What you guys are doing with that is huge. I didn't realize that it's stuff that's kind of taken from that Loon Lake program. So
Hmm.
that's awesome to hear because I know a few friends of mine who have gone to Loon Lake and said that it really helped them a lot. So that's really important. And you know what, man, like the fact that you guys are able to reach out to so many people now through this, I think you're absolutely right, man. I think you're gonna be helping, or if you have helped a lot of people, and you're gonna continue to help a lot of people that way, right?
Yeah.
Um, Now, is this something that you see potentially branching out to maybe even different countries at one point, or
Well, it's branched out to different professions. Like, we adapted the training to what's called the Frontline Worker Series. So, a large percentage of municipal workers across BC have an adapted version of this content. And that's really because of the leadership of Mike Roberts at the BC Municipal Safety Association. They're driven by data,
hmm
and they know what the cost of a psychological injury claim is to WorkSafe and what it is to the employer. And this is why, like, I'm shocked that more mental health training hasn't been a priority within our cultures, because when someone's off, I care about the human. That's what I'm driven by. But I know that the employer is driven by the numbers as well.
absolutely,
And
yeah,
we know that a single psychological injury claim for a firefighter costs WorkSafe over $200,000.
wow,
And they say that it's up to 3-to-1 ratio for the employer, which means that it's costing the employer up to $700,000. Which means when you combine it, a psychological injury claim is costing up to $1 million on
yeah,
average for a single firefighter.
yeah,
Now, there were 5 claims in BC in 2015, and there were over 100 in 2023. So
wow,
we've seen a 20x increase since 2015 in the last 7-8 years.
yeah,
And so something's going on here. We can look at it in a positive way and say, well, because we've reduced the shame and stigma of taking a knee, that led to a dramatic increase. We could say that the presumptive legislation we got in 2018 in BC with mental health injuries was a major contributor. Um, but if we peel back the layers, like why is there such a disproportionate percentage of firefighters off on a psych injury claim? And I would argue that while their symptoms might be related to trauma exposure, a lot of it is organizational trauma.
hmm
And that's something that there's really not, in my experience, a lot of appetite in getting to the bottom of. But we have data on BC firefighters when it comes to their mental health, and I can say, quite matter of factly that the anxiety that we talked about earlier with the hypervigilance and stuff, that is the norm within firefighters.
hmm
That's not the exception. It's celebrated and reinforced to be hypervigilant, but there's no skills to be taught in how to downregulate.
yeah,
And so that's why we see a lot of psychological injuries hitting being correlated with years of service because of the added layers of emergency calls, of sleep debt, of balancing these value systems in our life. It has a profound impact on us.
absolutely,
And if it's paired with things around like discipline within the organization or shame, humiliation, those are the things that drive suicide.
hmm
It's not PTSD, it's the shame and humiliation that people feel. And so that's why we need to be nice to each other. That's why we have to watch out about how we can talk to people in front of a group setting, because we may not have any awareness of how those words are interpreted or impacted by that person. And it can be like driving, a spike into a tree. The spike stays at the core of the tree as the tree grows around it, right?
hmm
So that's really what motivated me to build this occupational awareness training program. I'm curious to see like the evolution of mental health in the fire service. But I am proud to say like BC has led the way, I would say, within North America in terms of being so welcoming when it comes to what I would say is progressive evidence-based mental health training.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, this is me just assuming, but I think it's probably a safe assumption to think that the reason why it went from 5 to, you said 100,
Mm-hmm.
right, is because of the stuff that you're doing and the stuff that other departments are doing, um, where that stigma is being reduced quite a bit, and just having that ability to be able to come forward and talk and that kind of stuff. Because I wonder if this stuff was around back when you first started, I wonder what those numbers would have been.
Yeah,
I bet you would have been pretty similar because it probably would have been okay to talk about this kind of stuff. But the problem is just the culture, I guess, back then was just to like push it down, ignore it.
grin and bear it.
But then, I'm sure if we were to look at stats,
Yeah,
right? Probably the divorce rates were much higher. The
rates of
alcoholism,
alcoholism. Yeah,
yeah, were much higher, right? Like
yeah.
when I came on, when you were interviewing me, and I was talking about because my dad was a police officer,
Mm-hmm.
right? And back in the day when you don't talk about
Yeah,
your mental health and stuff, right? And he struggled with alcoholism, right?
yeah,
Um, I've always wondered what if it was okay to be able to talk about this stuff, where, how would that have impacted him differently?
yeah.
Right? And not just him, but everyone around him, right? So I think it's just really good that what you're doing is really resonating with people, and you've reached a lot of people,
Yeah.
like to have, over 10,000 just here in BC and 100,000 across Canada. You know, you've definitely made a significant impact on people's lives.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. When I built this, I didn't realize how large the scale was going to become. And it was much like my running career. You know, running at Burnaby Lake, you don't know how the race is going to go and if you're going to
Hmm.
get a personal best or whatever. And I'm a very process-oriented person that's very rarely focused on the outcome, which makes me probably incredibly bad at marketing because I don't brag or boast about the numbers, but when you say, yeah, 100,000 users on our ed platform, yeah, it's a significant impact on the landscape of mental health in Canada. And I do feel like there's a return on investment with this model. For me, the return on investment is more qualitative. Has it improved someone's lives? But I know that our work has led to employers saving a lot of money.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean more of our wellness model where, I am in charge of accumulating all the mental health indicators of a department of individual fire service members and then pairing them based on their scores on anxiety, generalized anxiety, depression, PTSD symptoms with an appropriate clinician.
Hmm.
Um, one of our departments that we work with hasn't had a single psychological injury claim since the program started in 2019.
Wow.
And so if we're talking about a return on investment,
Yeah.
again, in my opinion, when you do good work, your psych injury claims might even go up
Yeah,
because you're doing good work.
for sure. I agree
You're
with that for sure.
catching people in the red.
Yeah.
But long term, you're gonna save money. And public safety takes a lot of funding from taxpayers.
Hmm.
And I want to see libraries, community centers open on holidays in my city.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
they're closed because of a poorly managed psych injury where it's 10% of your workforce off, that means libraries are closed on holidays and
Yeah.
kids that are inner city don't have anywhere to go beyond their computers behind closed doors, right?
Yeah.
So it has a trickle effect throughout society when our public safety is not doing well with their mental health. And
Yeah,
organizationally, it becomes very dysfunctional too.
absolutely. Yeah. How can people who want to learn more about this, how can they go about doing that?
Yeah, so the company is called First Responder Health, www.firstresponderhealth.org. That's a good entry point. There's a number of courses that we offer. Um, we often enroll entire departments in our different series, whether it's like our sleep expert series by Dr. Glenn Landry. Um, we have like interprovincial training. We have the BC specific training. So this has been, we speak about it. I'm reflecting right now on the last close to 10 years that we've been building this company. We've done a lot. I'm actually surprised and proud of what we've done. Um, we've trained over 500 mental health professionals and put them on a easy to find directory that isn't paywalled, that isn't logged in, there's no data mining. So if there's one thing I'd like to promote, it's that we have this directory of occupationally aware clinicians. These are clinicians that have done at least 2, often 4 days of training through the BC PFFA on how to work with firefighters. And so if someone's looking for a clinician, there's a free opportunity there to have a look at the directory. And then if they want to learn more about, mental health in the fire service, we can enroll them in occupational awareness training.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Before we end it, a question that I like to ask to our guests is if you could go back to when you were a probationer, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
Not to personalize the feedback that you got from certain members on the job. What I've recognized over the last 10 to 15 years in the fire service is the same people that were very hard on me uh, were very hard on themselves because I've seen their life deteriorate over the last 10 to 15 years.
Hmm.
And so I realized that it really had nothing to do with me. I was just kind of caught in their crosshairs in something that was happening with them. And so, if we look at depression, not to get too technical, but there's kind of these P's of depression: permanence, prevalence, and personalization. What I would have told my younger self is to not personalize it. Don't let it affect your home life like I did, which is prevalent, and just be more active in self-care because it wasn't permanent, which is the third P, that things change over time. And it's like kind of that old saying of like, don't get too happy when you're on the highs, and don't get too low when you're in the low.
Hmm.
I would say that's my number one piece of advice to new recruits. Despite us being in the same profession, every single one of us will have a different perspective on their career and also their surrounding environments, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, just to normalize, this isn't an easy process to get through. The hiring process is just the beginning. It's 20 years or more of continuous learning,
absolutely.
and celebrate it.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Matt, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come and talk to us here. We've been trying to line you to come up for a bit now, and it's just with our schedules and it's hard to make it happen
Yeah,
sometimes. So I'm really happy that we were finally able to make this happen, and I'm very excited for this episode to come out, and I feel like a lot of people are really going to truly benefit from being able to hear you on this episode.
love it. Thank you.
So
Thanks for
thank
your
you very
time,
much.
Adamo. My pleasure.
Awesome.